Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Elise Eifert. I'm the graduate coordinator for the gerontology program at UNC Greensboro. I'm sharing co-hosting duties with Dr. Cynthia Hancock, the director of the gerontology program at UNC Charlotte, and Dr. Tina Newsham, the director of the gerontology program at UNC Wilmington. On behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for joining this special inter-university panel discussion featuring alumni from each of our programs. Our incredible alumni are going to share what their career paths in aging have been like and offer their advice for emerging professionals in aging. This panel is part of Careers in Aging Week 2023. Careers in Aging Week was created by the Gerontological Society of America to raise awareness about the diverse careers available in the field of aging and to celebrate current employees in the profession. We want to encourage you to be vocal about careers in aging. During this time, the demand for professionals with expertise in aging is growing rapidly, and we need as many people as possible to pursue careers in aging. Without further ado, I want to move on to our panel. Drs. Hancock, Newsham, and myself have a series of questions for the alumni panel. We're going to take turns asking these questions and allow each of our panelists to respond. To get us started, I think it's important to get to know our panelists. So let's start with introductions. Each panelist, please take turns to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and describe your current position. Give us details. We want to hear all about what you're currently doing. And don't be shy about who wants to go first.
I'll kick us off. Hey everybody, my name is Haley Kinney Norris. I am the Regional Wellness and Enrichment Coordinator for a senior living community based out of Wilmington, North Carolina. We have communities throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee. And I have the pleasure of supporting all of the staff within the activities department and the wellness department in their current roles, serving the residents that we have. So it's about 23 communities, and it's a lot of fun.
Hello, everybody. My name is April Franklin, and I am the founder of an organization called Fresh Wave Care LLC, and I create resources to help family caregivers get connected and to remember to take better care of themselves while they are taking care of a loved one. And I graduated from the UNC Gerontology program in 2015. Actually got a dual degree. At the time they had the MBA in the Gerontology program. So I'm excited to be here.
I'll go. Hi, everybody. I'm Leanne Kingsbury. I work now as an independent consultant. My work is primarily focused around what the federal government calls long-term supports and services, which is really sort of the overarching policy and practice where disability and aging sort of all come together. I came into the older adult aging space from the disability space, having worked in disability services for most of my career and being really interested in kind of that intersection. As I watched people with disabilities get older and realized that there really weren't a lot of people talking about it. I've spent a lot of time in the policy world, spent about a decade working as a federal contractor, really looking at Medicare and Medicaid, particularly Medicaid policy and home and community-based services. And I now spend my time doing a variety of work with different states around older adult services, thinking about really operationalizing person-centered practices at the level of people who use services and organizations providing services, and then also helping states think about Medicaid waivers and kind of best practices for services that ought to be part of their Medicaid waiver programs. Thanks.
Hi, I am Christiana Walters, and I am a Senior Center Program Director in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work in a nonprofit senior center, which is about 20% of the senior centers in North Carolina. And so I have an array of activities that I do. I manage the programs, I manage the budget, I do accounts receivable and accounts payable. I manage all the volunteers because as a senior center, we run primarily on volunteer help. I manage all the instructors and building and technology issues, and also we do fundraisers. So that's just my job in a nutshell.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Johnston. I am currently a geriatric care manager with Choice Care Navigators here in Greensboro. We serve older adults throughout Guilford County, and I like to say, and beyond as well, because we have clients in Mebane and in Hamlet. Geriatric care managers help older adults and families find resources, make decisions, manage stress, whether that is in the short term or the long term. Sometimes families hire us to help them figure out what's going on with their older adult loved one. They might not be sure what level of care is appropriate or if they should stay at home. So we can come in with our team of experts and, try to help them connect to resources. In the long term, we work with families who live outside of town, but their loved ones are here. So we can be boots on the ground to go to doctor's appointments, third party manage their home care companies, advocate for them if they're living in a retirement community, a number of different processes. We are also nationally certified as guardians, so we can be someone's guardian if necessary. We can become healthcare power of attorney if they wish. We do Medicaid applications. So we provide a wide array of services for older adults in our community.
Is that everyone, or did we have one more panelist to introduce?
I think that's everyone for right now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I have the pleasure of posing the first question. First off, it's lovely to meet you all. Thank you all for being here this evening. If you could just kind of take a minute and describe your career and aging journey, really set the tone for what we're talking about tonight. Things like, did you always want to work in aging? Have you held other jobs in the field besides what you're doing now? And if, as you answer this question, if you could really kind of emphasize the role that your gerontology education has played in helping you find your job, perform your job, or previous jobs, whatever, that would be really useful, I think.
Okay, I don't mind going first. So when I first, back in high school, is really what sparked my interest in the field of aging. At first, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. Worked with some animals and discovered that was not the area of interest that I wanted to pursue. But I was a part of this program called the Medical Careers Program. I don't think they have it anymore. But in that program, they allowed us to work at a nursing home. And while working at the nursing home, I formed a very special relationship with one of the residents. And it kind of sparked my interest in wondering what kind of careers were out there. So I went to college, didn't really know where to go or what to do with it. But after I graduated, I started working in healthcare. And then my mom told me about the gerontology program at UNCG because she knew I had an interest in working with older adults. And so that's kind of where my journey really, really took off. It was during that program that they encouraged us to find our specialty area of interest. And I learned that there were so many different opportunities in the field of aging, not just working in a nursing home, not just the traditional things that people associate with the field of aging. And I found my niche, which was caregiving. So I really fell in love with helping family caregivers get connected to resources. And so through the program, my internship, I partnered with AARP to develop a nonprofit it was a community group first at my church to support the caregivers in the church and the community. And then it eventually turned into a nonprofit called Caregiver Connect. And so then after that, I just found different ways to work with family caregivers. I've worked at a CCRC as a family caregiver specialist, support specialist. And my most recent venture is creating, my own business to help support family caregivers with a focus on millennial and male caregivers. So that's my journey in a nutshell. And I really credit the gerontology program for helping me to narrow in on that interest and giving me the tools to encourage me to, be courageous and to create my own business because, they had that dual degree component. So really, really thank you guys for the support that you provided along the way.
I'll jump in. So like April, my career in aging started in high school. My very first job when I was 16, I was a waiter in a dining room at a CCRC in Gastonia, North Carolina. And I pretty quickly learned that the story that I had been told by society and the media, et cetera, about older adults was not true. And I got to really know the residents on a regular basis, serve them every day, learn their stories, and ended up going to college at Appalachian State, graduating with a degree in sociology and a minor in healthcare management. Wanted to work in communities again, but didn't quite know how to go about it. So I ended up getting a job as an assisted living dining room manager at a Brookdale community in Charlotte. Worked in barbecue restaurants in college, so it was easy to get my foot in the door. Ultimately knew I didn't want to stay in food and beverage forever. And so one of the nurses suggested that I get my administrator's license. So I went through that process, got licensed and certified as an administrator. Ultimately did not end up going that route. Worked in sales and marketing at that community for about 3 years, moved up to Washington, D.C., worked at a rental community with all 4 levels of care downtown as the marketing director for 3 years, moved back here to Greensboro and worked at a local CCRC in sales and marketing for 3 years. After about 10 years, knew I still wanted to work with older adults, but was kind of starting to feel like I wanted to do something else besides sales and marketing. The pandemic started. We were not allowed to have anyone on campus to tour, which made sense. That was a good decision. We wanted to keep the residents safe. But I noticed the sales numbers and the quotas did not drop to match the situation. I decided I wasn't going to get blamed for any lack of sales, and so found out that UNCG had a online Masters of Gerontology program. Always wanted to go back and get my master's. Decided to leave my job and do the accelerated program, which is to take as many classes as humanly possible at once. So you can finish in 3 semesters, 1 year. Did that and learned about geriatric care management through the gerontology program. Even though I had worked with older adults for 13 years prior to that, I'd never heard of geriatric care managers. It was through an assignment about finding and describing a career in gerontology, and learned that geriatric care management, I could use skills that I had in my previous career, but really focus on what was best for the older adult instead of the community. And so ended up doing an internship with Choice Care Navigators to complete my degree. And Corinne and I decided that I should stay on after completing that internship. And that's where I am today.
Well, I can go next. So my career or interest in working with older adults started in college. So I grew up playing sports and working with kids and coaching, and anything outside was always where I was. And went to UNCW thinking I wanted to go into athletic training to help with, sports management, and was really interested in taping people for injuries and, all the anatomy. Really loved that piece. And it just happened that when I was at UNCW, it was going to put me a year back because I didn't sign up for one class that I needed. So I looked into another program that was very similar to athletic training. And so I went the route of exercise science, which I loved thoroughly. And upon my senior year, studied abroad before my senior year and looked at blue zones in Greece. And so started really being more aware of the older adult population and how other countries, there's no gyms, there's no formalized exercise. They incorporate it into their daily life. And so that was very interesting to me. Came back and was at my senior year, needed an internship. And it just so happened that a local retirement community was starting an internship program. So I interned there for about a year with the wellness director, learned the ins and outs of how to teach classes to independent living residents, and fully loved it. Brought in some fun ideas and finished my undergrad degree, started working at Boys and Girls Club because I needed a job after school. And that was kind of in the programming route. But I knew it wasn't long term. And a couple months after I got that job, that retirement community called me and said, hey, we have a position open for wellness director. And that is where I started my journey. Loved that. Was there for total about 5 years. And while I was there, I knew that I wanted to go back and get my gerontology master's degree. But I was, starting the new job and I wanted to kind of take some time to adjust. So I took a year off between undergrad and starting my master's. Went back to school as kind of a part-time. I did not do the accelerated route, Matthew, because I wanted to take my time a little bit. But throughout that program, I really was able to learn more about the aquatics therapy. I really enjoyed that. Learning different modalities of how we could incorporate exercise in the pool safely for older adults and the different benefits. But really just got to further the foundation of education so that I could better perform in my daily job. And then my route kind of expanded. They came to me at the start of COVID or 6 months after and asked me to support the other communities. So I had the pleasure of supporting all the other wellness directors in independent living. And then it has just grown from there. So now supporting all of the healthcare activities and wellness programs as well. But really just, I think the start of it was trying to adapt programming for everybody. And that's been that was a huge focus within the program. And then something that I've learned to incorporate every day of, not everyone learns the same way, just as maybe you all tuning in and all of us on the panel, our older adults don't learn the same way either. We have to accommodate needs. We have to, adapt and personalize everything. So I really credit the UNCW program for a great deal of connections and foundational learning.
I'll go. Hi, this is Leanne again for folks who are on the phone. And I meant to start with this before and I forgot. I don't know if anybody needs visual accessibility, but it's one of the things that I'm trying really hard to start all my meetings with. So if someone does need visual accessibility, I'm a white woman with brown and cough sputter gray hair. It is creeping up, brown and gray hair. I have on red glasses and a navy blue top. And behind me is a careers and aging virtual background that's got some red and green and kind of peach colored lettering on it. I started nowhere near aging, actually, for the most part. My background is as a certified therapeutic recreation specialist. I started out with an undergraduate degree in therapeutic recreation, and I went that route. Mind you, this was a long time ago, but I went that route because I had been working with kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities really since I was a kid. I started volunteering at a summer camp when I was 12 years old with kids with an IDD diagnosis. And by the time I got to college, I was certain that was the work I wanted to do, but I didn't want to work in special education. I somewhat like Haley, if I was outside, I was really happy. And that was kind of where I wanted to be. And so I ended up with an undergraduate degree in therapeutic recreation, worked for several years in physical rehab and medicine, and spent a fair amount of time with people who were coming into a hospital setting because they'd had a stroke. But also a lot of folks that were living with traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injuries. And, I think what continues really to drive my work is I have this fundamental belief that people with disabilities, whether that is because you were born with something that qualifies as a disability, whether you have an acquired disability, whether you've gotten older and you just find yourself slowing down. They have this fundamental, absolutely cellular level belief for me that people have the right to be in charge of their lives, at whatever that looks like and whatever support they need to do that. And in the disability community, the way that we sort of have embodied that since really the late 1980s, the way that we really have embodied that is through what has been called person-centered practices and person-centered planning. And that language has taken over kind of healthcare and disability space at this point, and it's very watered down actually, but I was really fortunate to come in on the very, very beginnings of that. And it just aligned so much with my values about people being in charge of their lives and staying in charge of their lives. And what really, I think, kind of sent me down sort of a co-path, because I've never left the disability space, but kind of sent me down a tandem path was in the very early 90s, I made the decision to be the caregiver for my grandmother. My grandmother was one of those folks who was living independently. She was on her own. She needed a little bit of help here and there, but she, was really doing quite well. She was 85 or 86 years old. And had a massive stroke, and within 24 hours, the next day, she was somebody that needed almost around the clock support and care. And I have a really tiny family. I'm an only daughter of an only daughter of an only daughter, which means there's nobody else, right? There's nobody. It was my mom and me. We tried a bunch of different things that didn't work for my grandmother and didn't work for us as a family. And I was really, really fortunate to, at that point, be working in a job with folks who said, who helped me kind of think about what did we want and what did my grandmother want and how could we make that happen? And the way to make that happen was to bring her home. And so she came home to live with me. We became roommates. And I knew the human services system really well. And even I had a hard time figuring out how to make sure we got the right services and the right supports in place. And I remember just sort of thinking, this is the space I work in every single day, and I'm finding it hard to figure out how to make this work for my family and my grandmother. What is this like for folks who don't work in this space and don't have the access to resources I had access to every resource I needed, and it was still really hard. And I think that experience, sort of challenged me to think more about how we provided services to older adults. And I was still and am still very engaged in the person-centered practices space. And we began to see about 15-ish years ago that language and that space really and those practices really begin to kind of enter the older adult space as well. And what I have found is having a degree in gerontology has really given me a leg up in that space. As an independent consultant, I'm reliant on other people to hire me, essentially. And I'm still a caregiver. Actually, I take care of my mom now. And she does not need the kind of care my grandmother did. She doesn't live with me, but being an independent contractor really allows me to work when I need and want to work, and also then take a day off like I did yesterday because my mother had cataract and glaucoma surgery. So it's a flexibility and family issue for me. But the thing that I think one of the things the degree has really done for me is, we now see, in the human services space, we just see this continual intersection now of people with disabilities getting older. So the federal government in 2002 started something called the No Wrong Doer Initiative. They brought together AAAs and what are now called Aging and Disability Resource Centers. And there's sort of been all of this federal drive to kind of recognize this space. And the calls that I frequently get from people who want to hire me are, we need somebody who knows both spaces. We need somebody who knows that older adult aging systems and policy and work, and what are the resources. And so I think, that's one of the things that having this degree has been really, really, really beneficial to me has benefited me.
I do the same thing, Leanne. I totally get it. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, no,
I want to make sure we have
the
a chance to hear from other folks and how they got to where they are. So I don't know
that's it.
who'd like to jump in and go next.
Christina.
I think Christiana is the only one who hasn't shared her path, and then we'll move us on to the next question.
Hi, Christiana here. My career journey started right out of high school. I decided I was going to be a nurse. That was my role. I was going to be a nurse. I just knew it. So I went and became a CNA. And started working in the hospital in rehab here in Charlotte. And I was like, this is it. I did the 2-year undergrad at UNC Charlotte. I was applying to the program. And as I was there and really was studying what I was feeling, I decided, you know what, I don't want to be a nurse anymore. I didn't enjoy the concept of just passing pills all day long, and that's all I saw was just passing pills all day long. So in the midst of taking back my application, I changed my major completely to public health. And I decided public health was the place for me because I wanted to teach people how to stay healthy without having to take all these pills. I didn't see that everyone should have to take 15 pills just to take pills. So I totally did a revamp, and I did the 6-year program for undergrad, paid a lot of extra money for it. But it put me in a place that I felt better. I didn't feel that I had to be, and then it was just working my way through college. I did the undergrad for public health, and I did a minor in gerontology and women's studies. And I wasn't sure about the gerontology in the beginning. I think it was actually Dr. Hancock who came to a couple of our classes and was like, hey, let us tell you about this minor. And I was like, you know what? I've done a lot with my grandparents. I was lucky and fortunate to have 4 grandparents when I grew up. And my grandfather had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the time. So I thought, you know what? Let's do this. So I took her up on it and started with that minor. And I love the women's studies minor too, because I thought that was very important at the time too. And so I was working and finally graduated in 2012 with my bachelor's and changed into becoming a patient advocate. And so I was working at the local hospital again as a patient advocate, and I found with the public health, I got certified as a certified health education specialist through the CHES. And I couldn't find anybody who accepted that, which was the craziest thing. I was like, here, I have this CHES. I've paid all this money for it. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. I couldn't find anyone who understood the importance of it at the time. So I'm working as a patient advocate, and I was like, you know what? All I was doing was setting up routes for nurses to go visit patients with Medicaid. And I was like, this is not for me. Luckily, in my bachelor's, we have to do internships, and along with the public health internship, which was, I think if I remember correctly, it was 160 hours of intern time. And then the minor was 90 hours. And I was fortunate that I was able to do it at the same place. I just had to show that I was doing a different concept with the 2 internships. And I fell in love at the senior center. And the only reason I found it is close to my house. And I was like, you know what, it says the word senior, let me just check it out. I didn't know what senior centers were. I didn't know the importance of senior centers. And once I really got here, I really found my niche. And so I was working as a patient advocate, and I was like, you know what, this is not for me. I was looking for anybody that would hire me. And finally, I got the call from the director here at the Levine Senior Center, and she said, Christiana, I've got the job for you. Do you want it? And I said, well, I'm still in school now. I've gone back. I got the grad certificate from UNC Charlotte. And I was talking with Dr. Shank. I'm sure a couple of you know who she is. And she was really mentoring me at that time. And she's like, Christiana, come on, just finish it and get the master's degree. And so I see Dr. Hancock shaking her head like that is exactly something she would say. Come on, just finish it. And so I did. And I was able to work with people where doing tertiary care, but also doing that preventative care, which was really cool. So now I have been the program director for almost 10 years now, and it all started with an internship. And so that's how I got where I am.
Oh my goodness, how much fun to hear your all stories. And what I'm hearing in all of these stories is there is no direct route to this work. Everybody takes their own unique path to get where you all have arrived. If you think about where you are and what you've done to get there, and then if you kind of get your crystal ball out and look, at the future, I know we have a lot of people on the call who are just starting this path, right? And what advice would you recommend in terms of trends that you see in careers in aging? Are there any particular careers that you would recommend? Are there any particular, paths that you think people might find great success? Any maybe even, they could learn from what you've learned, and make the path a little less challenging than we heard from everybody. So that's kind of the question. Do you have a career you would recommend? What future trends do you see? Advice related to future trends. And I will just say we are at 6:32 and we're on the second question. So just in the interest of time, you don't have to answer it, but if you feel compelled, feel free.
I'm going to give a really quick answer because I think it for me, it encompasses all of it. And that is, I think that figuring out, or at least trying, things that are related to people, providers, and policy is kind of, so are you at the people level where you are face to face with people doing the work? Are you at a provider? Are you interested at the provider level of service, where you're working with families and people, but also you have to pay attention to policy? Or, do you really like to, like my master's is in public administration and with gerontology certificate, because that was what was available at the time. And so that policy stuff, what are the feds saying to the states, if that's the kind of stuff you want to dig into. I think that's one way to really think about kind of where your interests lie.
I would say also the fact of volunteering or interning at as many places as possible, because as you all heard, we all had an internship in a different realm. And I think what's so great of an internship is that you can work with so many different departments. You can work in sales and marketing within, marketing to seniors. You could work in the wellness field for older adults. You could work in an activities and a fun programming setting. There's so many different opportunities to just find your niche, because there are so many different little things that you can do.
Yes, I want to piggyback on what Haley was saying. I think volunteering is a great way to figure out what you like to do, and what your niche is. And as far as an area that I see being a big opportunity for growth in the future, I would have to say home care, figuring out the home care problem. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to need home care, figuring out how to help people get access to that care. Don't really know what that job title would be, but figuring out how to solve that problem. So I would just encourage you to figure out what problem you want to solve, and then look for careers that are similar to helping you solve that problem. And I also want to encourage entrepreneurship too. If you don't see something out there where you feel like it's a direct fit for you, create it. And that's kind of where I am, creating what I think will be helpful to family caregivers. So I want to encourage that as well.
For me, it was writing grants in the nonprofit world. It's a way of finding money. Luckily, in the public health department, we were pushed on writing grants and learning how to write grants. So writing grants and learning how to find that money, that's going to be huge for you. Advocacy for seniors, finding where the needs are and really advocating for their needs. Because people aren't going to fund you because they look at you and you're trying to find the job that you want. Really listen to what the people need and advocate on those behalves. Network like crazy, because you never know, the person that you meet could be your next coworker. So really, if there isn't a way for you to network, get involved, and definitely internships, because that got me to where I wanted to be.
Well, I'd first like to say that if you are on this Zoom call, congratulations. There will always be older adults. So if you are entering a career in older adults, you will have job security. So if that's something you are worried about, fear not. There are many aspects of aging and careers within it. One of the things I'd like to say is I predict one of the future trends is that a lot of companies and organizations and careers outside of what we might consider gerontologically aligned will request gerontologists within their fields because of the growing number of older adults as you know, we're entering an era that's never existed before in human existence, where we have more older adults than younger people. And I predict that corporations, all sorts of entities, will want our expertise to help them sell their products, what have you. Dr. Kenneth Dykewald did a huge study with Edward Jones because Edward Jones recognized that the population was changing and growing. Tech jobs, MIT Age Lab is doing a lot with age tech, corporations, marketing. How do you market to this particular group of older adults? And when I say particular group, what does that even mean? Because there's 40 years worth of older adults. So how do you market to this group without being demeaning to them? Government, healthcare, construction, certified aging in place specialist. We do know that most older adults want to stay within their home. So how can they do that safely? How do you help them prepare to build homes to stay in? However, communities are changing. It's not the communities of old. They're becoming more focused on lifestyle. Haley can probably tell you more about that than I can, but the focus on lifestyle is showing that people actually want to move into this environment because it's more like a college setting than the nursing home of old. Look at Jimmy Buffett's Latitude communities. The sales team cannot keep up with construction, or the construction can't keep up with sales, excuse me, because people are going because it's fun. They want to go because it's fun. They know the healthcare aspect is there, but they're not focused on that. They're going because they want to enjoy their life and have a good time. And they like the message that they're being told that, come here, have a good time. Therapy, lifestyle. Christiana, I think you mentioned something about pushing pills. There's a great geropharmacist named Dr. Delon Canterbury, and his whole career is focused on deprescribing. He meets with people, he looks at the pills they're taking, he consults with their doctor, he takes their genetic code, and he figures out what is wrong with all the interactions of the pills they're taking so that they can have a better lifestyle. So as you're going through your gerontological studies, if you see things that interest you, focus on that. Think about things that interest you outside of gerontology and how you can tie your studies into that. And I think that's kind of what the future trends are showing, in my opinion.
I just want to jump in real quick and say we're fixing to come into a group of people who have been a part of huge social movements. I mean, we're talking about the racial movements, we're talking about women's and gay rights. And so I think that this generation of people are going to change the way we look at aging. They're not going to be silent. They are going to voice their needs. They are going to make their needs known. And I can't wait to see the purple hair, the tattoos, the spiky hair, people not afraid to talk about sex and their sexuality. Like, I think this is going to be huge going forward in the trends of aging, because these people have been making waves their entire lives. I don't expect that to stop as they get into retirement and older adulthood.
That's what I was just about to piggyback on, Christiana, was the fact of, with new generations coming into this field, there's such a wonderful aspect of pushing the boundaries that are currently in this field. I know I pushed for having more fun in the classes and the programs, and it's grown tremendously. And yeah, talking about sexuality, having presentations of LGBT older adults in retirement communities. That was the focus of my thesis in my master's program, was what does that look like and how can we program for these people to ensure that they are included and feel included. But having that fun piece, I started this Liberty Games. And so all of our retirement communities face off in Olympics every year. And we get them to travel down to different states and they face off in all different fun events. So that's kind of hitting on your point, Matthew, of it's kind of like a college. It definitely is. So pushing those boundaries of you all in the field, in your programs now, bringing in new ideas and pushing those boundaries and really just developing new concepts.
Rolling Stone cover bands in communities for the music, yeah.
There's a whole set of communities that are, and I'm boy, I'm drawing a blank on the name and couldn't Google it fast enough. There's a whole set of communities that are aligning with universities and that are partnering with universities. So you can live in the community that is sometimes on campus or right next to campus and access all of the university amenities. You can audit classes, you can use the fitness facilities, you can use the walking trails. I'm trying to think who just did an article on it, but it's just a great focus on, you know, both fun, but also education, and folks that really want to kind of keep their learning, you know, that I think probably believe that learning doesn't stop at any age.
And think about how great of an opportunity that is for the younger students that are on those campuses as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the intergenerational connections, the nursing students have an opportunity to work in those environments, you know, it's just incredible.
You know, I'm going to add one thing, and I know we've got to move on. The intergenerational made me think about this. If you're really interested in looking at some of the best practices, look at the work that the Eden Alternative is doing, it's now called CFI, but the joint working between the Pioneer Network and the greenhouse movement. Greenhouses are small community-based residences for folks needing care, usually 10 to 12 folks, maybe a little bit less. And just as an example, their experience during COVID was dramatically different than large facilities, just because they're smaller and they could manage the ability to limit exposure in a really different way. So they saw, you know, their outcomes were just really, really different. But Eden Alternative is a really good example also of sort of, you know, how do we engage people in ways that help them feel purpose and useful and really living in the space that they're in.
This is such a great discussion. Thank you all. April, I saw that you had unmuted a few minutes ago. I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to say what it is you're going to say. And I also want to call people's attention to the chat. There are some comments and some links being posted there. So keep an eye on that. And if you have ideas you want to share there, go for it. Sorry, April, you go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback on what Haley was saying about bringing the fun to the industry and just really reshaping the way we think about aging and how we address aging issues, want to say problems, but the challenges that come along with it. I think that's very important going forward, bringing new generations into it. As Christiana was saying, I think just think outside of the box about the problems that you want to solve and what the issues that we're going to be facing. I think that is going to be great, a great mindset to have moving forward. So that's all I was going to say.
I'll just one more thing real quick, just to hop on what April said too, you know, changing the narrative about the aging process is not only going to help the current generation of older adults, but it's going to help your generation when you get to that point as well. And I just think it's just so important.
I also just want to add, not necessarily always just focusing on issues, because aging isn't just about challenges. There's a lot of different exciting things happening too. And so focusing on adaptability and as Haley, the fun, I love that idea, thinking about different things that we can make more interesting and more exciting and more accessible for older adults.
There is a great book called Breaking the Age Code by Dr. Becca Levy. And if you have not read it, I recommend reading it. It's absolutely fantastic. It discusses a lot of the positives about growing older and how there are multiple opportunities. And she's done studies, and there are studies that back it up, that having a positive view of aging will literally add 7.5 years to your life. And it affects everything around you. So yeah, sorry. Thank you.
This is fabulous. Yeah, and I appreciate, and I think that people are dropping links in. We can drop in a link to that book maybe as well, to Becca Levy's work. we were talking about kind of challenges and opportunities that come with aging, and that just kind of parallels the next question that I want to pose to you all, which is really about kind of what things facilitate your career in the field of aging, and what things do you see that might serve as challengers or barriers? Thinking that so many of the folks watching this presentation are really trying to figure out how they are going to pursue their own career. What would help them? And so many of you have already mentioned some ideas, but other thoughts do you have on that? What would facilitate, and what might serve as challenges that the future aging services workforce might think about?
So I think that someone had mentioned this before of changing the narrative. And I think that's something really important for folks coming into this field to go into it with that attitude. When I first started working in senior living, I was really worried about having short hair and looking more masculine and, not doing the norm, right? And that's just a culture thing of things, but really going into it that you can really learn so much from this older adult population. And these older adults, whomever it is, are not only how you see them in the media. Matthew pointed that out. We think of a retirement community or a nursing home, and we think of a bad smelling place where people go and they pass. And that's not what it is. That's not what it is anymore. And as well, on the other end, older adults are not all grumpy and angry and don't want to be there. And so going into it with a positive attitude, I think is huge, that these older adults are open and they want to learn from you. And there's a great opportunity for you to learn from them. I have greatly learned so much from my residents. They've done presentations about what it was like in World War II. And I met one of the first female captains in World War II. I mean, it's incredible, the people that you get to meet while working in this field. And it's things that you would not learn from reading a textbook about World War II. It's sitting down with a veteran who served in World War II. What was that like to be a woman on a boat? Like, who was in charge of the whole thing? I mean, it's really great opportunities. And so I think there can be some concerns and negative things if you go into it with that attitude, but I think turning it around and looking at so many positives of working with older adults.
For me, my story was a little different, because when I came in, I was kind of put right into a management role, which was that usually doesn't happen. So I was very fortunate in that. But with that came the stereotype of, I'm a young girl, what do I know? I'm coming in here with just a wealth of information, I thought, but you really have to gain the people's trust. You have to listen to them. You have to know their stories, because they have some of the most interesting stories. It's really building those relationships with people so that they gain your trust as well, because you're not just going to walk in the door and someone's like, oh, great, you're here. Let's just get running. Like, they have to get to know you. It's almost an interview within meeting the people and finding out that you're there to help them, and finding that balance. So that really was important. Another thing I like to say is, this was not a get rich fast working in the aging field. I think really when you're working with older adults, you just need to know that this is working with empathy and kindness. If you want to make a whole bunch of money, I suggest working at a bank or somewhere. For some reason, public service does not make a whole lot of money, but you're making a whole lot more in your heart. And so I think that, to me, makes the biggest difference. So if you're wanting to make a whole lot of money, change your field.
But I think Wells Fargo hired a corporate gerontologist, so
Bank of America has one too.
Yeah.
Oh. One of the challenges that I would say is getting people who are not as passionate about this field, or who don't have the experience in the field of aging, to understand the importance of it and how it is important to them. So I think for us professionals who are in this field, it's important for us to connect our messaging to them, figuring out how to tell our story and making it connect to people who are in different industries so that we can collaborate to make a bigger impact in the future. I think that that is something to really, really think about.
I want to bring up something that's like a little bit outside of the box, but it's something I've been thinking about recently. You know, I'm a big anti-ageism advocate, and one of my worries is that there's a lot of generational anger towards the baby boomers in general. And I'm a little worried that that's going to mix with societal ageism and prevent people from entering the field of aging or blocking opportunities for older adults or helping solve the problems that need to be solved for older adults or not learning about the opportunities for older adults. So I'd be interested in other people's thoughts on that, but it's just something that's kind of crossed my mind recently. So
I was going to add, sorry, Matthew, it's not to add to your point there. One of the things I think we haven't talked about is the rate of accelerated rate of people living with dementia. That's a particular interest for me because it's one of the places where people very quickly lose control and power and control in their lives is really taken away from them. I've just been dumping a bunch of resources in the chat, but if you're really interested in in the space of kind of face-to-face support and care with people, but people whose lives often, really look different than or begin to look different and eventually do look different than the folks who kind of start off in the continuing care retirement community and dependent living. The folks living with dementia, rapidly declining dementia will look really different than the folks who are living in independent living. That's just a whole other space for us to really, really think about our work. And there's some folks doing great work out there. Teepa Snow is one of the folks, she's a dear friend of mine that does amazing work. Dementia Action Alliance is doing some great work. And I've just been throwing those resources in the chat as well.
This is great. So many great points that everybody's bringing up and so many great resources here in the chat. We'll be able to share. I think we'll be able to share the chat with everybody who registered afterward. We'll pass this on to you all. We have 6 minutes left, and the last thing we really want to do is make sure that the folks who are attending have a chance to ask their questions, I think. So if anybody in the audience has a question, you can throw them in the chat. I think let's do that. If you put your questions in the chat, and then we'll let the panel answer maybe one or two of them depending on time, but then maybe we could ask the panelists some of these additional questions and send out some information later, because there's no way we'll be able to get to everything in the last 6 minutes. So if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat, or if you really feel moved to do so, please unmute and ask a question. This is your opportunity to hear from a panel of amazing experts with phenomenal experiences. I know everybody's typing their burning questions now. I think Haley is dancing to the Jeopardy theme song in their head, right?
While we're waiting for a couple questions, I did put this in the chat, but Dementia Live is a really cool program. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but basically it's a simulation of the aspects of someone who lives with dementia, and it's a program that you can be put through to kind of see what it feels like. So
Abby is the brave soul who has posed the first question that made it into the chat. So I'll read it so that everybody can hear it. How can you change your mindset from seeing limits to seeing opportunities in aging? I think that's an excellent question. I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on that.
Spend time with people.
I would agree with what Haley said. Spend time with people. Also, just volunteer. Just try different things and see what you like. You never know, you might like something that you never thought you would have liked. So just get out there, put yourself out there, look for different opportunities and volunteer.
I think another big thing is spending time with someone and figuring out what they like. When they move into a retirement community or senior living community, there's a full assessment that's provided to figure out your hobbies, your interests, your background. And so establishing that relationship and connection and building upon that, I think you can pull out fun things that they didn't know that they would really enjoy or have not done in a long time. For example, someone who has not gone into a pool in 40, 50 years, I got them in a pool with me because I built that rapport and they started going every single week and they love it now. And so, yeah, I'll stop talking.
I would agree with that. I mean, spend time with older adults. The person you see in front of you is not just the person you see in front of you. They are the product of a lifetime of events and activities and all sorts of things that make up who they are. And learn about the network around you. Talk to people that are in other gerontologically aligned careers around you and the people that they interact with. And that's, to me, that's the best way to change your mindset, is to remember that they're not just who they are in front of you, it's their whole life that they've experienced.
I'm lucky that in the senior center, we see people who they come have fun, they socialize, they exercise, and then they go home. But we often see some who are drug in by their wives, a lot of men especially. And I like to get to the nitty gritty by being inquisitive and asking questions. We had one guy just this past week who came by and he was just sitting there and he was silent. And so I just sat there and asked him, tell me a little bit about you. What did you do? Found out he was a geologist. He'd traveled the world. He'd been in Paris and done all this fun stuff that no one would have ever had known had we not just asked some questions, which is very important.
That's so true. I volunteered at a respite center, and I remember talking to one of the participants there, and I just asked this question. I said, well, have you ever met anybody famous? And she told me that she met Elvis and told me how she met him and all this other stuff. And it was just the coolest story. So you can definitely learn a lot just by asking random questions, and you'll learn. I think you'll gain more from it than they gain from sharing it. They do gain something from sharing it, but I've just gotten so much out of learning about the experiences of the older adults that I've had a chance to talk to and really get to know. So
I see some additional questions in the chat. There was a question specifically for Haley, and it looks like you answered that. So I'll move on to the next one, because there's a question about policies. What policies do you think we should be looking at right now that will make the biggest impact on aging?
Or at least, I think this was only scheduled till 7. Do we want to try to send out the questions to the panelists and have them just jot up quick responses that we can share with everyone, or do we have time to go a little bit longer?
I have the Zoom until 7:30, so it's not like Zoom is going to kick us out. It's entirely up to you. I know everybody. We can finish with this policy question if you want. We'll make sure to end it there. If there's more questions in the chat, we'll go with what Tina said and we'll bring it out to the panelists.
I'm seeing lots of thumbs up and good to stay a bit in the panel or in the chat. So
thank you for keeping us on task.
I'm going to jump on the policy thing really quickly. Probably the biggest impact we've seen in the last 2014. So last 7 years has been the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services final settings rule. Final settings rule essentially said that if a provider of services uses Medicaid dollars to provide services, then those services must look like services that people who don't use Medicaid might ordinarily receive. And those services, it's really, the settings rule is a tool and is now a law to really promote inclusion, community inclusion. And it applies to people living in receiving facility-based services, but also people using home services at home. It has really fundamentally changed the way, has the ability to fundamentally change the way services are provided. The rule went into effect in January of 2014. States had to be compliant by 2 weeks ago, March 17th, 2023. Lots of folks still working on that, but it has really changed very literally things like people having privacy, locks on their bathroom doors. Literally, that was something that people had to do. So it's been really dynamic and kind of changing the way states and organizations that use Medicaid dollars at least view how services are provided.
I am all for talking with your local government as well. Local is going to be key in making sure that some of their funding is used for aging services. I just actually was talking with some county people not that long ago and really looking at the amount of money we spend towards elementary school students and compared in the budget to what we're actually doing for seniors going into this huge generational shift. So really talking and really advocating in policy wise for even local funding as well.
I personally think, because this is my specialty area, that we need some legislation concerning family caregivers. Family caregivers are exhausted, they are tired, they need barriers to access care to be eliminated. So any policies concerning getting family caregivers more resources to help better take care of their loved ones, I think are things that we definitely need to look into and need to be implemented in the future.
I agree with April. The amount of revenue that's lost every single year because people have to leave their jobs to care for their loved ones is enormous. And most of the time that's women. Women are the ones that take care of the older adults. And so like April said, any programs that we can get to help support caregivers, I think is vastly important. I think we need to be putting COVID money into Alzheimer's and dementia because it's a huge problem and we're nowhere closer to helping find a cure or support for people with Alzheimer's or dementia. And care in that regard is extremely expensive. Not everybody can afford it. And sometimes there's a gap of people who make more money in Social Security than the Medicaid income limits, but they still can't afford the care. And so how do you help those individuals? There's a lot of policies that could be looked at, I think.
Policies is like my least favorite thing to discuss personally. So do you want me to switch to the next question?
We're good. We can end on that note. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. We appreciate you being here tonight and sharing your experiences with us. We're awfully proud of you and the work that you're doing. Doctors Hancock, Newsham, and myself would like to thank everyone in the audience for their time and attention this evening. Please go out and tell everyone about Careers in Aging. Have a wonderful evening, y'all.